Are you a victim of cringe builds? Are you sick of getting baited? Then call Foxy on 0100 800 Foxy. Hey, what's up everyone? Foxy here, and today I'm going to show you how you can make your very own build. Now, making a build can be scary, can be daunting, but the way I'm going to show you how to do it means that even if you're completely new to Last Epoch, you should be able to make your own build. So how do I do it? I start with either an item or a skill that sounds really cool, and I work back from there. So I'm going to give you a example of exactly how I did my Righteous Fire Warlock build this season. And what I did is I started with the idea of Righteous Fire, which in Path of Exile is a big circly fire of death. And I was like, well, I know that Warlocks have a big poisonous circle called Aura of Decay. I'm gonna play around with that and see what I can do. So the first thing you do when you pick your skill, if you're gonna go skill first, is look at the scaling tags, and that's going to kind of lead your idea of what sort of things you're going to be using to scale that damage. So once I've got my idea of what skill it is, I then start to look at what items are out there that could be used. And I'm using a tool called Last Epoch Tools, which I'm going to link down in the description to plan my builds. So I'm not going to show you every single item, otherwise we'll be here all day. But what I'm going to show is the concept of how I approach it. First of all, let's just click the gloves. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because that is way too close. I'm going to start putting in the scaling factors. So I know damage over time and poison are two things that I'm interested in. So let's go with damage over time and see what gloves are in the unique area. And the reason I'm selecting unique, especially in season 2, is so easy to get really strong uniques using the imprint tools. So you could have nearly complete uniques in your entire loadout. You make them legendary and you basically get a free exalted item on top for almost every piece of gear. Now there are some exceptions, but this is a good starting point. So first of all, I immediately get drawn to the fact that this says increased damage over time. This looks like a really good pair of gloves. It's got increased poison duration, which is a bonus as well. There's lots of poison pen as well. This looks like a really good pair of gloves. So that this is going to be locked in my head. I then check a few of the others. This is all around bleed and fire. I don't think that's quite what we're going for. Void damage, not going to apply to us. Immortal Vice, another good pair of gloves. More of an end game piece. So I'm going to select this one. So there we go. We've got one item already locked in, and I just click save. And that's the start of our journey, right? And I do the same for all these pieces of gear as my starting point, just to get an idea of what's out there. Let's just give an example of a poison one. So if I type poison here and I go offhand catalyst, I'm definitely not using a quiver. I'm probably not going to use a shield. And I start to look at this. There's only two options here. I look here, Rot Mind, +1 level to damage over time spell skills, less damage over time taken. I know that the Aura of Decay hurts you over time. So this seems like a good starting point as well. And then we just keep going and going and going till you fill in all of the blanks. Okay, but now what if you wanted to start with the item first and then look for the skill? Now, I find this less common. Generally, you start with the skill and then you find the items. But sometimes when you're playing a character, you get this awesome drop, you find this cool item and you want to build around it. This actually happened for this build as well. Before the season 2, I saw this item was coming into the game and I wanted to mess around with it. So for me, that item was Downfall the Righteous. As I mentioned, I want to do a Righteous Fire build. It kind of all came together, right? So this one says fire damage over time, necrotic damage over time, curse, and makes another big circle of death. So I was like, perfect, 2 circles of death. What's better than 1 circle of death? 2 circles. So now I'm like locked in, right? Okay, so maybe poison isn't the be all and end all. Maybe it's going to be a damage over time build. So that might inform how I build my skills, might inform how I build my items. So this is a damage over time that we've already got, so perfect. This one's poison and a little bit of damage over time as well, so this is still fine. And again, you build it exactly the same way as I was discussing. And through the power of bad editing, we have a load of items. So obviously you're not going to get these items straight away, but I find that a lot of people find this daunting, not because they don't understand the game, but because they can't work out where to start. So what I like to do is just throw things at the wall, see what sticks, and then obviously you can hone it over time. Now in Last Epoch, you can't really go wrong in the early game. Whatever you do is going to work, really, even if you make the worst build ever. So you don't need to panic about that. Later, when you start to see issues with it, you can then hone it and you hopefully understand the build a bit more. So let's say we're happy with these items. So now we'll come back to it. We're then going to go to our skills and see what we can do there. So when looking at skills, we're going to start to look at the little icons next to the skills themselves. Now we know we need Aura Decay, which means minimum we have to get 10 points in the passive tree, and we're going to go down the Warlock tree. So these skills are probably going to be more interesting than the others, but we're going to have to get there first. So we're also going to have to look at some of these starter skills as well. And looking at the icons, we know that we need ignite chance and dam chance for the down for the righteous. So we might want to look at ignite and dams because we know we're a damage over time build. And we're also going to look at poison because again, Aura Decay is a poison spell. So what we're going to do is look for the ones that make sense to us. Now, Chthonic Fissure, I can see has fire, has damned, and has poison. The reason poison's grayed out is because you have to spec into it within the skill. So this is a great starting point. So loading this up, what I do is I start to type in these scaling tags, right? So we can type in poison, see the tree there. We type in fire as well, and we type in damned. And you can immediately start to see it creates a path for you. You start to understand where you need to go. And the great thing about Last Epoch is it kind of spoon feeds you. I can only go left or right at the start of that. So that's not a daunting idea for me. I look at these. This one gives me damage. This one saves me mana. Right now, I don't know how mana intensive this is going to be. I'm starting a build from scratch. So I'm going to go down the damage route just as a starter for 10. And then what I'd do is start to get the nodes in the fire. I actually want to convert all of this to poison because I think there'll be a better way of getting ignite elsewhere. So I'm going to spec this directly into poison. And this basically means all the fire nodes now become poison. So fire is still important to us. It doesn't change how we look at this tree. So I then start spec into these nodes. And then over time, I just build this tree out and go down all the areas that I'm interested in. And then I do the same for any other skill that I think is useful. Now, generally, as a rule of thumb, you probably want a movement skill. So, for example, transplant would be a great one for warlocks. So I'm probably going to lock that in regardless, just as my starting point. And then later in the game, if I get enough movement speed, I might unspec it. And sometimes you want a defensive skill as well. So that's another thing to bear in mind there as well. And then you basically build out your skills. Coming on to the passives, we're going to again start small and build up. We're going to do exactly the same thing again. We're going to type in poison here. We're going to type in fire, damned, and just kind of work out where we want to go. Now we need at least 20 points in our passive tree. So what we want to do is get 20 points here, and then we can move on to the other areas that we're interested in. So I then tend to look at these things, see what we have. And as a general rule of thumb, the first way I do it is I build the damage first and then work out the defenses later. Some people like to do it the other way around. All I'll say is defenses are hugely important in all ARPGs. I don't know any that it is important in. So don't forget defenses. But as a first run, I tend to go damage and then I build the defenses based on feel. So if I start to keep dying in monoliths, I'm going to build in the defenses instead. So here we have intelligence, which scales on some of our scaling tags. But this one is just straight up damage. So for now, I'm going to just put a load of points in the damage and work backwards. And maybe I'll end up grabbing some of these points as well because intelligence is a very powerful stat as well. And then I keep doing this until I have filled out the passive tree enough to move on to the next area. For my build, I know that I need 10 points in this. So after I build the 20 points in here, I then move on to the points in on this tree and so on. And I'm not going to go through all the passives because that'll be very tedious to watch me do that, especially for a build that you might not be using. But if you are interested in that build, I do have build guides, which I'll link in this details. And I'll also have a build planner as well. But one thing to mention is you've got these nodes. Let me see if I can find one. This one is a great defensive one. But basically where you see point bonus, when you get a threshold of points, so in this case 5 for this skill, you gain the thing that's under the does not scale with points allocated. If I got 5 points in this, you'd get more armor per curse on the target. The does not scale just basically means if you put more points above 5, you're not going to get any more of the ability below that. But that's not really a big deal. So that's how you kind of approach the passives. So next I'm going to talk about idols. Now, idols can be quite daunting. You know, which size idol do I use? How do I know which ones are good, etc. Let me show you how I approach it. So first of all, I look at the bigger idols because they're going to take up the most space and they tend to have the most powerful affixes on them. And then I start to fill in the gaps around it. So I'm going to pick ornate idols, and these bigger ones have sort of your class skills on them. So here I'm going to click this and I'm going to start to look at the prefixes and the suffixes. And I'm going to scroll down and just read them, right? You don't have to do searching. There's not that many of them. This one jumps out at me. This is increased damage while Aura Decay is active. So I'll click that one. And then I'm going to go to the suffix, which is the second stat on it. See if there's anything that I'm interested in. This one could be interesting to me because I take a lot of damage over time from this ability. And health regen isn't as important to me because I'm going to be going more ward based. I also look at some of the other stuff, and idols are great for filling in missing resistances early on as well. So if you're just lacking a resistance like physical resistance, you just stick this on for now and it fills in the blanks. And then I'm also going to look down here. Shared poison damage would be very, very good for me just because the actual share poison damage is more than the poison damage on the old idols. I actually think using the Weaver idols is almost always the best option. There is some caveats, but generally just look at the Weaver's ones. They're already so much better. So I'm just going to click that and I'm going to click save. Don't worry about these. You're going to roll for those in the game themselves. Let's not overcomplicate it. So that immediately takes up space. And I'll do the same. I'll look for all the big idols and eventually you'll run out of space on here. So I'm just going to quickly simulate that. So now you're going to start to run out of space. You're going to see, well, now I can only fit like ones or twos here. For example, if I want to get a 3, I'm just going to next look at the 1x3. So that then, we're starting to narrow down. What I like to do when I do builds is narrow down, make it less complex. So do I care about any of these things on the 1 on 3? Chance to apply damned on hit. I actually need this to trigger the Righteous Fire ability. Chance to poison on hit, that's really good because I'm doing a lot of poison. But damage over time is probably going to be the winner here because everything scales on damage over time in my build. And again, now we're limited to 1s and 2s or 3s down here or 3s here. So we just keep doing this. You're going to get the idea and you start slotting in the gaps. And then it kind of makes itself, right? So on to blessings. Now, blessings are great in this game. They fill in gaps in your build, and they can also help with some of your sort of class identity build, things like chance to poison, chance to bleed, lots of good stuff. And then there's a few that just help you find items or shards and stuff, which you can just put in whatever your preference is. If you know you've got like a really difficult relic to find, maybe you want to go and find more relics. If there's some particular skill shards you need, maybe put in the skill shards that find those skills. So let me just give you an example of these. So I'm going to look for wand drops because wands are important to my build. So there we go. And you go on through that. On the more interesting side of things, you can go to the things that give you abilities. So the Black Sun, for example, what I would do is I'd look through all of these things and see what stands out to me. Chance to apply Ignite on hit sounds really good, especially for my Downfall of the Righteous. Most of these level ones are underwhelming for my build, but what I do know is as a Warlock, it's really hard to find Void Resistance, and you'll get a feel of this. You don't have to have this knowledge up front. As you're going through the game, you'll start to realize what you're struggling to find. And Void Resistance is a pain to find for a Warlock. So I would then slot in this, and that, if I hit the top roll, solves any need to put any Void Resistance on my gear, which means then I don't have to use up slots getting Void Resistance. And if you want to start with just the normal ones, so you've got a more realistic start to your build, you can do that as well. And then you've just fill in the blanks once again. So now through the power of bad editing, we've got a build that I made earlier. So what I then like to do is once I've got the idea of what I have, so I have my like kind of end game concept here, I then start to build a simpler version of that using items I'm going to likely find early on in the game, just to make sure that I don't have a terrible leveling experience. Alternatively, you can use like a leveling guide to then get you to the point that you then build your own build. That's fine too, no judgment there. But this is what I like to do. So I've done exactly what I've shown you here, but instead I've now just gone and put some of the items that I know I'm going to be using and the skills I'm going to be using. So like Wandering Spirits I'm going to be using, so I've got that on my affixes. I've got some defenses, I've got increased poison damage. I've slotted in things that make sense with affixes that are going to help my build. And then I've got the key item that I know I really want to make the build defining here as well. Some of them can be really high level, so you just need to factor that in. Is it going to take forever to get to that item? In which case you might want to put like a placeholder in for that period. And then how do I then perfect the build once I've built it? So you're going to then start to look at the legendary side of things. Once I get a 1 LP or a 2 LP, I don't normally go above 2 LP when I do my build planning. I think that's just too unrealistic. You will eventually get them, but don't build around that. They're just bonuses. I end up start to refine my build. You see certain uniques get taken out and certain things get tweaked. So I start to then look at my skills because often increasing your skill level can be massively powerful. And in this case, I've added in +3 to level to Wandering Spirits on this one. I've added in poison damage on this one, etc. And I start adding. And how you do that, if you want to know in this planner, is you just go to the item, and then you can start basically adding to this base. Right? I can just click here and it'll change it. So nice and simple. Now, what happens if you hit a brick wall with your build? Like, Foxy, I did what you said. I've got to 200 corruption and I keep dying. I've gone all attack. I need to work out how to do defenses. This is where I then start to advise that you read up more on your skills, understand exactly what's going on, the game mechanics, but also you can like borrow from other guides. So for example, you could come to my build guide, you can look up other build guides on things like max roll, or in the build guides here as well has a long list, and you can basically open this up, click the class that you're doing, Warlock, for example, and just start to open some of these up and see what other people have done. And you start to see patterns, right? You can see here it's got, seems to be Bone Clamor seems to keep appearing in a lot of these builds. And you're like, well, maybe there's a reason for that, right? And then you look at it and you're like, why are people using this? Well, you gain 1 ward per second per 3% uncapped necrotic resistance. That's probably going to be the reasoning why people are using this. It's a defensive item that has ward, which warlocks tend to use, and it's uncapped for necrotic resistance, so it's going to keep getting higher and higher. So then you start to slot that in, and that's exactly what I did, right? I started to die a lot, I switched out a damage helmet for a defensive, and I started scaling my necrotic resistance, which is in this build I put together is 347%. And that's like a way you can start to work out what's going wrong with the build, things you can tweak, and looking at other people's guides is a really good way of sort of filling in the gaps. I look at people's passive trees, I look at people's equipment, I look at people's skills, and that then informs me maybe something I'm missing, and then I work it into my build and see if I can make it unique to me. So hopefully this has been useful. If it has, feel free to give me a like or a subscribe or both, even if you're feeling generous. Generous? That's not a word. I don't have an outro, so let's just end on generous. Okay, bye everyone. Be generous. See you later.